Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome back to another video over here on That's Comical. And if you're watching, it happens to be a Wednesday. Happy New Comic Book Day. Andy is here, so clearly we've got another episode of The Ultimate Journey coming at you right now. And Andy, I think you and I are very much in the same boat right now. We're on a little bit of a lack of sleep, but I'm hoping you're doing well today for this recording.
Doing better than I was yesterday, but real talk, gonna be better tomorrow after a night's sleep. But I'm here, I'm ready to chat, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, just gonna make you jealous here. I actually got a 2 hour nap in today, so
Nice.
yeah, I managed to sneak that in. I told my daughter that if you don't go to sleep, then daddy can't go to sleep. And if daddy can't go to sleep, then we can't go out tonight to get something for dinner. So that
That'll
was the
that'll
best way
work.
that the best way. Yeah. So I got to be honest with you before we start discussing our topic. Obviously, we're going to be going back to the Marvel side of the Ultimate Journey, the road to Secret Wars. Now it's getting a little bit interesting, especially because of the fact that Marvel Entertainment has been showcasing the next couple of Avengers movies leading up to Secret Wars. So things are getting interesting on all sides. Marvel. But I got to be honest with you, Andy. Part of me was a little bit upset about the fact that we were steering clear from the Ultimate Journey to DC just because we were having such a great discussion. And I was like, sort of like, well, I really don't want to let this go because we're really getting into some interesting parts, but we got to follow the program. That's the way it is. So we're going to dive back into the Ultimate Universe of Marvel Comics on the road to Secret Wars. And we're going to be talking about a staple in the entirety of this Ultimate Universe run, and that is The Ultimates, which is a fantastically put together story written by one of my all-time favorite writers, Mark Millar, and probably an artist that I truly adore, but don't speak about enough, and I really shouldn't. That's Brian Hitch. Brian Hitch's artwork is phenomenally good. And right now, I'm currently reading the Red Coat book over at the Ghost Machine universe that he's doing the artwork for. So I don't talk enough about Brian Hitch. And what I love so much about Brian Hitch's artwork is it's so beautifully detailed. Like you see the intricate pieces when you're reading the book, like the rooms, the settings, the buildings, the atmosphere. It's so intricate, his artwork, and I'm just so glad that they actually managed to get him to draw an interesting story that Mark Millar put on the pages of this book.
Yeah, and I'll say, Steve, just to jump in where we started, I had a little bit of the same feeling you did about something akin to sadness and stepping away from the DC side of this, just because we really did have a good time. The last several episodes talking about DC, but really just think of this, viewers, as a glorified plug to watch the rest of the videos on the channel. Because I'm excited about this too, and really diving back into this. I think I told you before, Steve, I had read this already
Yeah.
years ago at this point.
Yes.
Um, but this was interesting for me because it's the first time I was reading it through the lens of working towards Secret Wars. I'm fairly familiar with the Ultimate Universe, but it was more like a clean slate start to the character, which is what it was intended to be when I read it initially years ago. So I have some different thoughts about it this time, maybe a lot of similar thoughts, but agreed with you on the overall quality of the book. Let's go with that. So I'm really excited to chat specifics with you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the few things that I personally love about the way that Mark Millar writes is as somebody who knows a lot of his work. I mean, I'm trying to promote the Miller world to you, sir. I mean, his independent work is incredibly good. But one of the few things that I do appreciate is that Mark Millar and Geoff Johns have very similar beginnings and passions. Because one of the few things that I absolutely know about Mark Millar is that he loves these classic characters. But what's a little bit different about him as opposed to Geoff Johns is that he loves these characters so much in a way that he wants to try and experiment with them. to see what can he do with these characters that has never been done before, and yet still keep those iconic personalities and images in check. Geoff Johns, on the other hand, he likes to go back to the past. He likes to ring in the golden age in a little bit of a modern day, but still remind you of those classic ways of storytelling. Mark Miller, he looks to the future. He wants to give you something different. He wants to give you something bold, sometimes controversial, exciting, and both of them now pretty much saying that the big two is a weird place to be right
Hmm.
now
Hmm.
in terms of getting your stories done. They're now finally finding ways to feed those loves and those passions that they had for those iconic heroes and villains from Marvel and DC, and putting them now into their own work. Mark Miller with his Miller World did it much more before Geoff Johns got into his Ghost Machine universe, and now Geoff Johns has found his footing on his characters that he's now bringing to the comic book faithful in the present day. So that's one of the few things I like about Mark Miller. He really wants to give you something that you've never seen before with these faces that you know and love.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. I don't mean to be unfair to either of these incredible creators to be comparing and contrasting them. It's just for obvious reasons with our journey. They're both at top of mind right now, right? So I think the way you frame that is exactly how I've been thinking about it. We've talked a lot about Geoff Johns' love for character and history, and the way that Mark Miller brings that to the table is a similar thing, but in the reinvention and the getting you to think about characters in a different way. Um, two two mixed results here. Okay, there's a lot I love about what we read for today.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some stuff that understandably is probably going to make a lot of longtime fans, look out the corner of their eye, right? But I I accept that as the creative freedom of trying to do something to get the audience's attention, to make something new, to embrace what the ultimate project was about, what the ultimate universe was meant to do. So I think there's a lot to be found here for longtime fans who are going to, at sometimes cheer and at sometimes gasp at what's being done with characters that they have this deep history with. Um, Again, mixed results. But really, I think worth reading. And even though the point of our ultimate journey isn't so much to review, I think I'll take a chance kind of at the outset just to say, I consider this a worth reading story. It's not one of
Absolutely.
those ones that I would go out of my way, burn in recommendation capital, like this is the next story you gotta read, definitely. But if you're doing something like us, this story can't be skipped. If you want to learn about the Ultimate Universe, this story can't be skipped.
If you're a fan of the MCU and
Yeah,
you really
that's
want to see where their inspiration comes from
a
in terms of the
lot.
Avengers, oh my goodness, it comes from the
So
pages of
much.
this story arc.
So much of
the,
it is
the
in
the
here.
climax and the final battle of this story is very much the same. See, the thing that I discovered is the final battle of the Avengers film is actually a hybrid of the original 1963
Hmm.
battle and Mark Miller's story,
Yeah,
because you got Loki from the 63 books and you've got the Chitauri, who we'll get into it just a little bit later, in the Mark Miller story.
yep,
I
yep.
love that. I love
Yeah,
it. And
no.
that's where you get Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. Clearly, you see all of the personalities that you got from your Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man, your Jeremy Renner Hawkeye, all of these, except for maybe a couple of them. Oh man, do you see the inspiration in the pages of this book?
The MCU is deeply indebted to this book in particular, even beyond the Ultimate Universe as a whole. It's deeply indebted to this book.
Yes. So I just want to get my biggest problem out into the open. I know, Andy, you've been waiting on bated breath, but I wouldn't be surprised if you felt the same way. The biggest fault of this book is it's so effing dated.
Yes.
The
Yes.
celebrities that are particularly picked in this story, the constant mention of the various political figures and pop culture references. It's like, wow, a
It's
person who is a child that was born in like the year 2010 or further, they're not gonna get like they are not gonna know who Shannon Elizabeth is. I'm telling you that right now.
it's very dated, and you know, without diving too deep into it because there's so much to say about the actual story, I'd expand that too. There's a lot of it that didn't age particularly
I
well,
agree.
which
I
I
agree.
would be I would be remiss not to admit, particularly the viewers that I'm recommending this to, that I think there's a little bit too much casual misogyny from characters that are heroic characters that like very of the time. This was not out of place at the time, but I think there's even more of it than in most books of this era that we have talked about and
Mhm.
read. So I pointed out because it hits the ear a little off key in
Exactly.
2025. You are exactly right. It's the thing I couldn't get away from reading this book. It is so of the time that it was written, which doesn't feel like it
2002.
was all that long ago to me,
No, it was
but it is
2002 when this book was written.
it's so of its moment that like you kind of need to tell people. It's like it's so interesting. By deciding that they were going to take Marvel into the modern day and do a new take on the universe and shed a lot of the history of these characters, they actually made a more dated starting point than these heroes have in their, you know, Silver Age renditions, right, of these characters. So you know, it's got its pluses and minuses, but I think that there is a charm to that. And quite frankly, for people of like us, I think there is a charm to realizing that something that feels that recent to us can be dated. It's
Yeah.
interesting to have nostalgia for 2002.
Yeah, it is
But
weird.
yeah,
I
it's
don't know
worth,
how to
you're
have
right.
nostalgia for 2002, to be honest with you. But anyway, the books begin, the first story arc begins, because again, if you want to go a little further down the rabbit hole, I would definitely recommend Ultimates 2, also written by Mark Miller. Ultimates 3, which is a 5-issue miniseries written by Geoff Loeb. We'll get into that as we move a little bit forward. I mean, I would say that that one's a little hit or miss, but I would definitely say at this point in time, if you like Ultimates 1, definitely check out Ultimates 2.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot of fun. So the first part of this book begins with Captain America fighting in World War II. And right off the bat, when you take a look at everything that happened in that book, it doesn't feel like he's fighting in 1945,
Mhm.
especially when you see the structure that Captain America and his crew are actually dropped into. It looks like they're in the early to mid 2000s in 1945. It is so weird to look at
Mhm.
sometimes.
Mhm.
But there's a reason why that was the way it was, and we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But it was still
Yeah.
it was definitely an exciting start. It was
Mhm.
action packed. The art is gorgeous, but it leaves you with a lot of awkward pauses and definitely a lot of questions. But at the end of the day, you still get the outcome that happens. Captain America sacrifices himself for the good of America winning World War II. And we eventually find in the second issue that he is thought out by S.H.I.E.L.D. because
Mhm.
S.H.I.E.L.D. is the big thing. That was the interesting twist about the Ultimates. It was the Avengers are not necessarily their own superhero team. This is a superhero team that was actually brought together by a secret US government agency.
Yeah.
That's the interesting difference. Like, what if that was the case, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
So they thought out Captain America, and that's when we're already introduced to Iron Man, Tony Stark, and a very interesting version of Bruce Banner.
Mhm. Mhm.
That was
Yeah.
probably the most intriguing one.
Yeah, yeah, I would say, you know, there's at this stage, there isn't too much that strikes you as like radically different from what you think of the characters, outside of Bruce Banner at the time, with how he's portrayed. I will say though, I feel like they introduce Tony's drinking so quickly,
Yep.
probably just to remind everybody that we're in a new continuity again.
Yep.
And I had my in rereading this, I had my, fandom moment of like, we're not in Kansas anymore, all new.
Yeah.
When he's
You
just
know,
immediately drinking martinis at 7 a.m.
that brings up a very interesting question because I have actually never read Demon in a Bottle. Have you read that story?
Yeah, yeah, I've read Demon in a Bottle. It's worth reading when you get the chance. That's a classic. Yeah,
I know.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely. But again, when you read this version of Iron Man, you totally see Robert Downey Jr.
yeah.
That's the funniest part about that.
It's funny. They mention his name later on in the book, and obviously Nick Fury compares himself to Samuel L. Jackson, and it's
That
just
is still one of the weirdest parts of the entire comic. The
it's
fact that
so
they're
weird.
sitting around and talking about who would play them in
Who would play them?
movies. That is so weird.
It was so strange. It just, you look at it with from our perspective now and it just jumps out at you. But anyway, getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Bruce Banner, and the kind of like intelligent but beaten down, completely unable to access the Hulk, or like there's a very interesting kind of push and pull with what had happened to him with his abilities with the Hulk that is it creates a you know it creates a interesting dynamic to go into the story with of his connection with his own power or lack thereof with the control he doesn't have over it, which kind of brings back into question the kind of fear of the Hulk,
Yeah.
which I think is something that gets lost before the Ultimate Universe, where we've got different levels of control over the Hulk. We've got different, ways that it's levels of control, both activation and control when he's in that mode, making him scary
Yeah.
again, like the true Jekyll and Hyde thing,
Yeah,
is
and
really
that was the
good.
interesting part about this. The fact that the Hulk had already been running amok before, and they never really go into any detail as to how they stopped him the first time because there was no superhero team to stop him,
Yeah,
which I found
it's
very
there's
interesting.
questions about how it works at this point, but clearly we're coming into it with a level of, white glove care around how are we going to interact with Bruce Banner because we know about all of this between the Hulk vaccines and how much or how little control they have over that, however many plan Bs they have should the Hulk, as we see, eventually reveal himself. Really just fear is the word I keep coming back to. The kind of underlying anxiety of what the Hulk is, what the Hulk can do, and what the Hulk means just feels so refreshing to
Right,
jump into that new. Yeah.
exactly. And then through that, we also get introduced to Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, aka Ant Man or aka Giant Man and the Wasp. And we basically learn that they're very much involved with S.H.I.E.L.D. As a matter of fact, Hank Pym seems to be moving up in the ranks in regards to science work for S.H.I.E.L.D. to the point where Bruce Banner has actually gotten demoted. They know each other well. And you definitely see the mannerisms of Hank that we always saw in the comics, very much into his science work and sometimes completely not even realizing that Janet's even there. And it's very similar to what Reed Richards does with Sue from time to time, just because these are geniuses at work and that's just the way their minds operate.
Yeah, and we will both in this book for sure, and later in the Ultimate Universe, see how those antisocial behaviors in both of those characters play out in this
Right.
this version of the
Yeah.
Marvel Universe. Yeah.
Exactly. So then, of course, when we find out that Steve has officially been unfrozen and he's starting to acclimate in the fact that he is now very much into the future, there are some really nice and heartfelt things that actually take place as he's trying to get used to living in the modern times. I mean, I think one of the nicest things that Mark Miller does in this book is the fact that he gives you guys and right in your face, Bucky never died. Bucky actually survived the war. He unfortunately and fortunately married Gail, who was Steve Rogers' love when he knew that Steve was gone, so she could have a good life. and it was just really nice. And it even can someone be very emotional when he actually sees an elderly Bucky and Gale actually meeting Steve for the first time in a long time and actually catching up in so many different ways, and them also giving him an understanding of what's been going on ever since he's been frozen in time.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really nice thing to actually have.
Yeah, it's nice in a book that, an overarching comment about the book is that this is 13 issues, one's a double, so basically 14 issues. It's not that it didn't have room to breathe, but we are introducing ourselves to versions of some of the most iconic characters in the Marvel canon through this book. It can get really crowded. There's a lot of key figures that we need to learn about in this book, and I am thrilled that Steve gets to have that moment with his quote unquote supporting cast in a book like this, that we still make space for the human, the adjustment to the current day. In a lot of ways, it feels like a Captain America story, Ultimates.
Well,
In
you know
many
something,
ways.
but you want to know something? That's because that's Mark Miller. Mark
Yeah.
Miller has a talent of character building. And the thing that I love so much about Mark Miller when it comes to his writing, especially after reading so many of his Miller World books, he knows how to, and we even saw that in Civil War. He knows how to crowd a space and still manage to make sure that every single character is singled out, if anything, for a single panel or a word bubble. He
Mhm.
just knows how to let people know, yes, there's a lot of people in here, but there's a reason why they're all in this room, and you're going to meet each and every single one of these people. That's
Yeah.
what I really do appreciate about the way he really focuses on character.
Yeah. The MCU even tried to borrow which characters they focus on in their introductions based on how Mark
Exactly.
Miller did this year. It's really funny. It's not a compare and contrast, but man, if you are familiar with the MCU and you've not read this book, you're going to find this book very interesting.
So that was that. Here's probably one of the more interesting things. What do we make of Thor in this story?
What
Because
do we make of Thor?
all I can say is I still have no idea if this Thor is in fact a Norse god or an
Yeah.
absolutely insane kook.
Yeah.
I still can't figure it out.
Look, I either way, did he I mean, like we're going through the book chronologically. Don't watch this video if you want to avoid spoilers. Spoilers for near the end. He does like absent a bomb to like another realm, presumably.
Yeah.
Presumably, it's really another realm that he takes it to. Yeah, what an interesting Thor, and personable, and
Yes.
able to, and clearly has the powers, and Mjolnir is Mjolnir. Um, just what a you are right to just sit there and like revel in the absurdity of the unknowability of it, because Mark Miller handles that perfectly.
Yes. But then, so now we're officially. I believe it or not, guys, we're moving really fast here. But that's one of the other things about the Ultimates. This book moves very, very
It
fast.
does. It
It really,
does.
really does. So we basically have been going through the first 5 issues where they're trying to get these newfound heroes to come together and become a superhero team. And everybody is not necessarily sure about how they feel about working for the government or just being a team in general. Nobody's personality is really mixing. It doesn't seem to really be working. So then all of a sudden, the Hulk comes about because Bruce Banner is jealous about the fact that his ex-girlfriend Betty Ross is on a date with Freddie Prince
I,
Jr.
oh my God, right?
The
I
dating
forgot it's
of the
Freddie
book.
Prinze Jr.
I
This
still
book
will.
is
I will also say that it's
this book
probably,
is so dated, dude.
but again, I do feel that if you want to get the whole, this is the one thing that I am gonna tell Mark Miller and somewhat insult. That is the dumbest way to get the Hulk out in the open, man. It is such a stupid idea.
I we did warn everyone that
I
this book
know.
was very
It's
dated when
stupid.
we started talking about, like, oh my God, I even forgot that one. It was Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Being so different, it's like he's jealous of Freddie Prince Jr. and a young person's going to say, "Who the fuck is Freddie Prince Jr.?"
Mark Ruffalo, you have so much to live for. Yeah, but
Wow. Yeah, it's and even the dialogue of Hulk, like he's
yeah,
saying, he's the word bubble. Like I'm reading it, it's so cringe. It really
yeah.
is cringe.
Yeah, yeah. But all this is to say they've been trying to get the team together over the course of this book, and I know we're moving fast, but here comes the Hulk. Maybe a strange reason for the Hulk appearing, but this then becomes our kind of, cohesive action call to arms to make the group be what the group can be. It turns out it's one of their own, but this is still a threat that they have to respond to. And then we get a pretty cool action scene,
Oh, very
which
much
lets
so.
us really enjoy the level of detail you opened by talking about in the art. And we get a couple really great action sequences in the
Lots of good
entire
splash
course of this
pages.
book. Yeah,
Lots of great splash pages and
yeah,
beautiful color
yeah.
work.
Hmm.
And of course, at the very end of the battle, it's just like Bruce is basically saying, I only did this to get you guys to unite." It ends up with a boot to the head from Steve, and he's completely knocked out. And that's basically the end of Bruce Banner for a little bit. They take him into captivity, keep him in the prison cell that Loki was kept in the Avengers. Everybody doesn't have to take a good look at that. But then we get into the second half of this story, and some very interesting things take place. And one of them, for me personally, is very discomforting. And that is some things that we learn about Hank Pym and
Yeah,
Janet Van Dyne. First of all, I
yeah,
think one of the first major twists is the fact that the Wasp is actually a mutant.
yeah,
That was a very unexpected thing, because they do mention the Ultimate X-Men, and they talk about another book that actually Mark Miller was writing at the time, talking about how mutants are very much feared. And we also find out that Magneto's children are now working for the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D., which is also a little bit strange. But probably one of the most uncomforting parts of the book is the fact that we find out that Hank Pym is an abusive husband, which is
yeah.
really sad to watch.
Yeah, it's really upsetting. I don't have too much to say on it. We can I can successfully leave it at this is not the Hank Pym right?
Definitely not.
This is he is being written completely differently. Candidly, this was like kind of my example at the beginning of hit or miss with the new takes on the character. This is something a little different from, I want my hero to be a hero kind of thing. Like I found this very difficult to read. Nevertheless, it is part of the book. So that is, I mean, a lot of the action that comes next stems from
Yeah.
this. So it's important to talk about.
Yeah, but at the same time, I gotta be honest with you. This is also part of the book that I don't really enjoy, because
Yeah,
I don't like the way that Captain America is written in this part of the book, because that's not the way that Captain America is. And I understand what Mark Miller is trying to do. He's trying to do something different, but sometimes, even when you have the best intentions, it just doesn't work for
yeah,
everybody. And I just did not appreciate this personality trait in Steve. I
yeah,
really didn't.
yeah. This the next like three issues from this point or so just leave me unsatisfied. And I say that really in contrast to the first arc of the story we're talking about today. Generally speaking, I really loved everything up until that point. This is just where the misses kind of start a little bit. Even if they don't completely take away my ability to say this is a lot of fun, people should read this.
Yeah, so basically Steve is on a manhunt for Hank Pym, and he basically wants to clean his clock. And then at the same time, we're also introduced to Black Widow and Hawkeye, which is a lot
Yeah,
of fun. I love
that
the
is
way
fun.
those two work.
Yes, no, that is definitely fun. And the questions of where the hell are they? What the hell are they doing? You just get dropped in on them, beating the shit out of everyone in some office
I
building.
mean,
And
looking back and knowing the history of the MCU, they should have basically told everybody they were in Budapest.
yeah.
That would have been fun.
I would have liked that. But yeah, so we get introduced to them with, again, like I mentioned before, a really cool action scene, a very
Oh yeah.
different action scene from what we experienced in the fight against the Hulk, but one that is really cool nonetheless and lets you see what these two characters bring to the table outside
Oh
of
yeah.
the,
And I
core
love their
core
banter.
Avengers we just
Their
met.
banter is perfect.
Yeah, yeah. We immediately get the history that the two of them have. Really, really well done. This is one of my no notes moments in contrast to what we are just talking about with Hank and Steve.
And one of the few things that I do love about them is that when Nick Fury has them joining the Avengers, they really add a little bit of an extra dimension. They sort of balance out the superheroes. You know what I mean? They,
hmm
they, they basically do provide the human touch.
hmm Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I think that human touch is the way to say it because the other Avengers at this point are so larger than life that even though Black Widow is jumping out of a moving helicopter, grabbing a thrown sniper rifle and saving Hawkeye, like nevertheless, there's something more grounded to humanity with them. And I really do think they are that kind of, you know, pardon how this sounds in a Marvel show, X Factor to the Avengers at that point.
And then and yes, once again,
Ultimates.
we're rushing through this, guys, but this is not because we don't have anything to say. It's just that this is exactly how
Sense.
you feel when you're
Yep.
reading this book.
Yep.
So we literally are now getting to the final stretch of this story, and this is where we actually discover that what we are dealing with here is an alien invasion that has actually dated all the way back to World War II. So the fact that this whole invasion of this alien race called the Chitauri, who have the ability to shapeshift and take over bodies and stuff. It pretty much feels like it's a modern day take on the invasion of the body snatchers.
Mhm.
And we basically learn that they're basically trying to invade and they're trying to take over the world. And they've been trying to do it since World War II, which explained the structure that you saw in the first issue that Captain America was trying to take down. And the most important thing is that this is where every character that we have seen in this story, everybody is now officially, taking a step back, realizing that we have something bigger. Let's put our petty qualms aside. So Thor's on board, Ant-Man and the Wasp are on board, Hawkeye and Black Widow on board, and we get even the Hulk is on board. And it's the true Avengers against the Chitauri, and it is a spectacle. It is gorgeous. It is incredibly illustrated. It is a mile a minute. I am not kidding. This part of the story just goes. It moves.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely does. And look, there's a lot of cool intricacies to it. Like I said, it's a dense book when you get the chance to read it yourselves. Um, the motivations and how everybody even physically gets to such a fight, really, really great to see. But the main thing is it's that level of detail. It's those pages and pages of readable action that really, this is, we overuse the word cinematic sometimes when we talk
It's
about
yeah,
scenes like this, but like that's the only way to describe it.
exactly. And the mission's over, they win. Time to fight another day. A couple of things are left on the table, which includes uh Janet kissing Steve. That was probably, where is this gonna go? I still also loved the fact that they were talking about where Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, where the hell were they? And
And every
Quicksilver was like,
time it comes up,
Quicksilver says, you didn't see me?
every time, play back the cameras at the slowest speed. I was like,
Exactly. But they didn't really have much of a role, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, but they actually do have a bigger role in the second volume. Just going to let you guys know. And they definitely are a driving force to where the ultimate story moves all the way to Ultimatum.
Mhm.
We're not going to get into those books and going into further detail, but we are definitely going to mention them again because when we do come back to you guys with another step to the road to Secret Wars, we're going to actually be looking at the aftermath of Ultimatum. We're going to be looking at two versions of Ultimatum Requiem, which is where we're going to see the Fantastic Four side of the story. Spider-Man's story is actually not an aftermath. Rather, it is the whole event of Ultimatum from Spider-Man's perspective. Because where we're heading now in the Ultimate Universe is a very controversial moment. Most people believe that Ultimatum was basically the end of the Ultimate Universe and basically caused it to just go on a downward spiral till it was basically no more post Secret Wars. But we'll have to talk about that with you guys and give you guys our own important take on it. But yeah, look, The Ultimates is a fun read. It's got its fault. It's not perfect. But if there's one thing that I will say about The Ultimates is you will not be bored. You will
No,
not be bored.
no, no. You might raise an eyebrow at Freddie Prinze Jr.'s inclusion, but you will definitely be entertained.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to wrap up another episode of The Ultimate Journey, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment in the box below. Leave us a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest content. And we will see you in the next one.